What's the name of this podcast?
You need to listen. I'm a pulse taker. I just coughed on the podcast. Sorry.
If politics is personal, how can we not take it personally? I told you I would divorce you if you voted for him.
Go
the
from
unhinged
there.
liberal of the day.
Yeah. We were talking about abortion and women's rights. I've always found it difficult doing the show on those issues because I'm not a woman.
Shocking. There's a lot of men who have no problem having very strong stance on that.
Always love talking to you, and the podcast is a great way to do that. I'm Steve Scaffidi, host of the Political Power Hour, 620 WTMJ. Kristin Brey, spanning the stage, and you do like 8 billion other things.
Yeah, that's
This was just a little foray into the podcast world, which I'm glad you do with me.
What's the name of this podcast?
You need to listen. Do you like how you need to listen? Is that how you would?
Yeah.
Would say? Yeah. Because I think this is a good one. It's sort of we always have these varied approaches to how we do this. You're more like research oriented.
I like data.
I'm a pulse taker. I'm a quick grab at some of the.
You exist on vibes? Is that what you're telling me?
I look at the headlines. I do some research. I read a lot. I
You
watch
do read
a lot.
Yep.
I like to think I'm experienced in life, and part of it's from doing a show for 8 years.
You're curious?
Yes.
I would say you're a curious person.
I would say you're curious too. That's why we do what we do on our shows. But this podcast is sort of for people who haven't watched, listened, consumed before. This is sort of an interesting look at topics that we think are very topical and relevant from different genders, different generations, different political ideologies. Are there any other differences that we acknowledge?
How do you take your coffee?
Today, I'm drinking latte. So I'm taking my coffee as a latte.
All right.
So no liquids for you, but some for me.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting topic to me because I did research on this.
Okay.
And this terminology that is very popular today about politics being personal actually originated from an essay in 1969. And I brought that up to you in our sort of pre-talk. You have attributed that to the 60s.
Women's liberation.
Yeah.
Second wave of feminism.
Which I think makes a lot of sense. But when I hear that topic broached on like a million shows, and I hear it talked about on talk radio and other things, I would acknowledge that all politics is personal. But there's more to that story, and this is the way I'm going to preface it, and you can take it wherever you want to go and respond to this. When you take that approach, just like anything where it's one side, other side, for example, advocacy reporters who say Republicans are evil or liberals suck or variations on that theme, you've eliminated any possibility to have any reconciliation, listening, communication, understanding. And if you say all politics is personal and you cite, like, for example, one issue, women's rights, abortion, what chance do we have to sort of reconcile that? That's my concern.
Well, I think the origin of politics is personal is trying to convince people to get more invested and knowledgeable about politics. Right. And I think that still stands true today, because obviously women's liberation, the consciousness raising groups that were happening in the 1960s as far as women.
I just coughed on the podcast. Sorry.
Women finding the similarities of what their experiences were and how policymaking impacts that. Right. And I think there's an argument for that today. Like there's also the if you don't do politics will do you. Right. So like not understanding how things work and how it impacts your lives. And so I think there is the point being that I think it's an objective statement saying that politics affects you personally, whether or not you're paying attention.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're invested in it or not.
But then I think the other side of this is when I brought up this topic with you is if politics is personal, how can we not take it personally when we're talking about in this very heated environment of our values and our identity being wrapped up in our politics? Because I think we are in a place now where there's a lot of people who, since 2016, people losing their relationships or choosing not to continue their relationships, whether it be family, whether it be friends. I mean, there was anecdotes being shared online after this last election of people filing for divorce when they found out, a wife finding out her husband actually voted for Trump. And like Reddit threads of this guy like freaking out because his wife was serious. She's like, I told you I would divorce you if you voted for him.
There was just a reality TV show where the people separated because of those differences.
And so it's like, and I as someone who our friendship, some of our other CJ Safer, Brian Reisinger, there's like other guys that I know are Republicans that are conservatives, that I value what I learned from them. But it's also then I'm not going to say who it is, but I have someone more personal and closer in my life who has veered in a very different direction. And like, I think sometimes when we talk about politics, it does demonstrate what his values are. And sometimes it's really hard for me to reconcile that and like continue to respect him.
Is it hurtful?
Kind
in some
of.
way, the words are hurtful.
So like some of it is like, so it's like, to be blunt, is considering abortion to be a fringe issue, because he thinks like his biggest priority is like macroeconomics, markets, global trade, like things like that he sees on a very, very high level that a lot of us don't even think about because we're consumed with our daily lives. So to him, that is something that he doesn't really think about, and he doesn't have to think about it. But to me, it's like, I don't think he gets how hurtful that is. It's like, you're saying it is a fringe issue that me and your niece, and my daughter's rights are not a priority for you.
Not a fringe issue for you.
And it's like, so in this conversations of people who choose, because then people are like, well, you're really gonna end your friendship, or you're not have a relationship with XYZ person over politics. And it's like, how do you bridge those two things? Because we are thinking about people's lives being impacted by these policies. So how do you handle it?
I have always tried, because I have some of these situations. First of all, I have close family members who have different political beliefs. I'm a Republican, but I'm not a Trump fan. And they're Trump supporters. They're still in my lives. We still have conversations. We try to do it civilly. We don't have, massive arguments in front of other people or even with each other. I think that's sort of the way I handle it. I guess I just have this fear that if we allow everything, whatever your issues are, and everyone has different issues that they think are either fringe or really, really important in their lives, because that's just the nature of the species. We all have different priorities and different lives and things we have to worry about. I just worry that if we take it to the next level, which is basically, I can't live with you, I can't be around you because of your politics or how you think about whatever issue we're talking about. What's the end game of that? It's just complete separation, which is, I think, really, really dangerous in any country, especially this one.
Well, and also, I mean, I don't know if you saw, because it's like, I think some of the conversation, at least from if you see Democrats and Democratic aligned groups in disarray right now as far as messaging, but I felt like this too. I mean, the biggest thing for me coming out of the election was not so much, how could, some of the rhetoric of people being like, how could 77 million people vote for this guy and blah, blah, blah. It's more of like, how do we ever find a basis of reality again when everyone is either they're not online, or if they are online, they're in their corner of the internet of what they think is reality. And so like what information they have access to, and like the conversations of Democrat, like how do we reach XYZ people? What messaging works to reach them? And I think it's the same thing. It's like, I feel like there has to be more conversation. There has to be more conversation with people you don't necessarily agree with. And I think shutting them off completely is one thing, but it's also like, how close do you want to be with them?
Yeah, separation is different. But here's where I think it gets really critical: demonization.
Yes.
I use the advocacy journalist example where that party sucks, or talk radio, those liberals are crazy. Where do you go from there?
Liberal of the day.
Yeah, like where do you go from there? Like, okay, and I'm always amazed. This is the part that drives me nuts. That kind of one-sided conversation is as popular as it's ever been. Whether it's talk radio, the news programs, the fake news programs, whatever. It's as popular as it's ever been. So apparently the public has said, there's a market for this. We're going to consume it, which only feeds into the...
It's like the dunking on people.
Yeah.
Right? And like...
And we're all excited about that, apparently. I'm not, but some are.
Like the... Yeah, it's like from the right, it's like owning the libs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's the same thing that exists on the left. I don't know if there's like as much of a term for it, but there's tons of accounts out there that like are just dedicated to embarrassing. Like Walter Masterson will go up. He doesn't do as much, but he does a lot of man on the street interviews, and he's very quick on his feet, right? But so it's like kind of the inverse of what Charlie Kirk does when he goes to college campuses,
right.
And then they just post the clips where they look better, right? Yeah. Like they made a better, stronger argument. But there's other accounts out there that, are just making fun of people for getting it wrong or whatever. And it's just, it's like when you're watching it, depending on which side you're agreeing with, like it's like a win, like it feels like a win, right? You're like, oh yeah, get him, like our team, our tribe. But I've been, especially what's been interesting as someone who tries to use humor and stuff, it's hard to be funny without leaning into that, right? Like, because it's low-hanging fruit to use jokes to make fun of an entire group of people based on like their political ideology, but it's not helpful.
You know, we were talking about abortion and women's rights. I've always found it difficult doing the show on those issues because I'm not a woman.
Yeah.
And I've
shocking. There's a lot of men who have no problem having very strong stance on that.
No such limitations or barriers. They're apparently experts on everything, including how women's bodies work and all the stuff related to that.
And yet they're not, because a lot of them don't know that there's two holes.
Not to be mean, but a lot of them have never dated a woman in real life. So I guess that's the way I would sort of look at that. But, you know,
is there one congressman in particular you're thinking of?
No, I'm not naming any names. Although we could, because it's the podcast, we can say whatever we want. But look, I guess for me, the frustration I'm having is again, I'm not using myself as the model of how it's supposed to work. I'm just my example because I'm living this example. I have family members who are Trump supporters. I have close friends. Most of my foursome in golf are Trump supporters. We've somehow found a way to coexist, to do family events and all that stuff without making that the sole focus.
So here's my question when it comes to those conversations, when you have them, like, because everyone, like I said, like, so the person I was referencing, it's bigger macroeconomic things. Like, there's a lot of other issues where we align. He just doesn't think it rises to the occasion to outweigh other things. So for you, when you're having these conversations with people in your life where it's like, you disagree on the candidate itself, but like, do you have to make rationalizations or justifications on why those people support this candidate? And like, you're like, well, that's the reason they support them. So like, I can live with that versus like you wouldn't. So if we're talking about politics, like would you play golf with someone who was like an active KKK member?
No, there are limits to everything.
So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's like, why is it because of why they support Trump that you're like, well, I can wrap my head around that you're like,
I would say I
where
know
the
why
line
most
is?
of them, including family members and friends, is they like some of the policies. Most of them, on an honest day, would admit that they don't like a lot of the behavior of the president. I've, as soon as recently as yesterday, called him unprofessional and unpresidential because I don't believe that's how a president should act. I think at the end of my argument, I would always come back to this is why I think the way I think. I don't necessarily accept your arguments, but I understand why you're saying them because it sort of defends the mindset that you have. I've seen people act like insane members of our society on Facebook just recently, where they just absolutely blew out any semblance of normalcy in how they acted on Facebook. And I would never call them up publicly, but I want to say to these people, what are you doing?
you don't want to send them like a private message being like, you okay, buddy?
I might do that.
Yeah.
But for example, one of my good friends, lifelong friend, said I had gone nuts because
You personally?
Yeah, yesterday, because I had dared to say that maybe we shouldn't treat the South Lawn of the White House like a Tesla showroom. Is that controversial? But I had gone nuts, direct quote.
Because you criticized the Tesla commercial?
I dared criticize President Donald J. Trump.
Did they not know where you've been standing on this issue since like 2016?
You know, listening is a skill, and it's something I say all the time, listen better, be smarter. But I think when you look at this stuff, they almost don't hear it. And look, I understand. He won the election. He got the most votes, something the last guy got in 2020, which sort of became a whole story on its own. He got the most votes. Therefore, he gets to do some of these things. But we also, as citizens and voters, get to comment on those things, and especially me and you, because we're paid to comment
Apparently not
on.
if you're on a green card.
Yeah. Get the hell out of here. That's a whole nother conversation, First Amendment rights. Like,
Well, I mean, it's so like keeping us on topic. This is where I think it gets hard because you said you wouldn't be friends with someone who's in the KKK.
right. Like, where's the line?
Where's the line?
Yeah.
Where is the line between? Because you know, it's for a lot of people who have disowned any Trump voters in their life. The argument I've heard often is you might not be a racist, but the fact that you're okay with racism, I can't.
Yeah.
Like the fact that like that may not be your number one reason why you voted, but since you're okay with it, you're condoning it, I no longer see value in our relationship. And so it's like each their own. Like we're not going to convince people to change their minds about this, but I just because I do think coming back to where we started, if you have political beliefs and you believe and you see how things impact, how policy and politics impact people's actual lives, it's hard not to take it personally when people have very different values than you.
Break that down for me. So I know you're very passionate about a lot of things, but this is one of those things that you really, really talk a lot about. And I heard your show. You've dissected this in a million different ways. The ability for women to get the services they need, right? And that's been impacted state after state. And even as a Republican, I don't agree with any of that nonsense. The fact that
women are dying.
You're stripping women away of the things they need to keep themselves healthy and their family healthy, and we could do a whole thing on vaccines, and maybe we will at some point. Just the insanity that's taking place. But how do you, day to day, deal with that? Because these are things that affect you as a woman. How do you deal with that every day? It's got to be like weighing on you.
Well, it's weighing on me less now that I'm not pregnant. But that was certainly, I was pregnant during, you couldn't get an abortion in Wisconsin.
Right.
And that was my first question when I got to my doctor, my first appointment. I was like, so, I was 37, so geriatric pregnancy.
Yeah,
love that term.
Which boggles my mind, by the way.
But one of the first questions, I was like, what happens if something happens?
Yeah.
And she goes, we have ways to get you to Chicago. Like because we're lucky enough that we're in Milwaukee. We're close enough to Illinois at that point. But now that I, have other birth control methods and stuff, like for me personally, it is not a daunting issue, but it could, depending on where this all goes. Does it change my mind as far as having another baby after Frankie? Like, I don't know. And we literally just on the show today, 106% increase in women coming in asking to be surgically sterilized at UW at Meriter in Madison.
It boggles my mind.
The year after Dobbs, and it's women who have an increase of women who had never had a baby, and it's an increase of women because they know they never want to have a baby, and their fear is because some of them are in same-sex relationships. Their fear is if they get sexually assaulted and they get pregnant, there will be no choice for them. And so they are opting to be sterilized before that can ever even happen.
What would you say to a politician who advocates for some of the more extreme measures that sort of have happened in some states in this country? Would you confront them on it?
Like if I saw them in public?
Or had them on the show, talking about maybe a more general political topic, but then that they're very extreme on that issue.
That's a hard question because I feel like it's like, is that how... Taking out the fact of what is our show and is it the appropriate place to do it? The thing that's hard is I would want to ask the question because I just feel like again, going back to your original point, the data shows that the countries with the lowest abortion rates have some of the most wide-ranging access to abortion, access to sexual health education, access to contraceptives. And when you empower people to take care of their sexual health, accidents happen less. Unintended pregnancies happen less. And I think really it's like the arguments, and I understand some people, and I experienced this, right? And I've talked about this with my friends who are in OBGYN, Dr. Kristin Brey.
Right.
I get that at some point when you're pregnant, especially now with ultrasounds, which I don't know for you guys when you had your kids, did you have ultrasounds?
Yeah.
But it was new. It was newer technology.
Brand new, yeah, and not as clear.
And there is something that changes where it goes from being, as a woman, of cells to a baby. And for me, it was around 14 weeks when I went and I got an ultrasound. And I was not expecting how the arms and the legs, and I was like, and I cried in the office, and it was like, so at that point, it changed. And at that point, had something happened to my pregnancy, I would have been heartbroken, right? But that's still a personal decision. That's still a personal feeling. And so the science isn't clear on when is this a person? And you're only hurting women. I think that's why we say cruelty seems like it's the point, is because women are dying. The DOJ just dropped the EMTALA case in Idaho that basically allows Idaho to turn away women who are in sepsis and to avoid having to give them an abortion. So an abortion that would save their life, they will let you die because that fetus's life is more important than yours. Even if you're a mom, they would rather let you leave your children motherless than give you an abortion. And this is the thing where it comes back to, like, when I say it's like people who consider it a fringe issue, it is just the devaluing of women's lives and women's health that is so heartbreaking.
Could you ever see yourself supporting a candidate for office, whatever office that is 100% aligned with you on all the other things you care about, whatever those are, but was not aligned with you perfectly on women's health, abortion issues?
But here's the thing. You can be
sometimes that's the choice.
You can be a person who's like, I would never get an abortion. But it's not anyone's decision to ever put that. You can't policy something that is so personal and so unique, especially when something goes wrong, when they are wanted babies. Like, second and third trimester abortions are children who have names. And yet this is what we're saying still to this day in Wisconsin. After 22 weeks, you can't get an abortion here. So if you have a medical emergency after 22 weeks, you have to leave.
Yeah.
And like these are children that have nurseries. And the trauma that you're already and grieving that you're already going through, knowing that your baby that you were so looking forward to is not going to be there. And then to have to make travel arrangements and all of the things to go actually get the care that you need is just inhumane.
One of the things that drives me nuts about the abortion issue, and that's obviously something that drives a wedge between people. One, it's always characterized as right versus left. I know plenty of people on the right who have different thoughts about that. But the way that plays out is often when I talk to elected officials away from the show or away from the public eye, they often have very different opinions about those issues than they do publicly or professionally as an elected, And that's sort of, I always thought was interesting. But it's not unique to that issue. It's also the same thing with guns. I've had Congress people tell me that all they hear about is people saying, you got to do something. They agree with them, but then they go and vote differently when they're in the public eye. That's an incredible political reality that also drives me insane. And, when we talk about politics being personal, I agree. Everything is personal now, and that's sort of the way we live. Everything's out there. We push out all of our information on social media, like it's like we're talking to our neighbor next door over the fence. Everybody knows everybody's shit now, which is probably not a good thing. But also they know, and this is where it really becomes personal, everything you think about every issue, because not everybody, but a lot of people share everything.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you. Since you're of a different age than I am, and you were not always someone who talked politics for a living, because we mentioned this when I was on your show on Tuesday, as far as like there used to be a time where you didn't talk sex, you didn't talk religion, you didn't talk politics. And like, I think there's groups that always have, but you know what I mean? As far as like polite conversation did include those things. Do you really think like politics wasn't personal then? Like it was like politics was still affecting people. And so what's like
the difference?
Yeah. You think?
Yeah, because the difference is, I know we got to wrap this up, but the difference is that I'll say 30 years ago, and again, time is, always relevant.
So that, granted, 30 years ago was the 90s.
Yeah, for me, different for me than you because of the age gap, which is significant, by the way, in case you haven't realized watching the podcast or listening to the podcast. The two sides, even extreme examples of both sides, the two major parties, were able to reconcile and come up with really good policy. That does not happen today. That's the difference. That's the real life manifestation of what we're talking about. Once you've personalized all this stuff and made it us versus them, you get nowhere, which has led to the incredible hostility in politics today, both from the people that do it, that are elected to serve, and the people that watch it and vote for it. Everybody's pissed off about everything.
Do you feel like the two parties were closer together in 30 years ago?
Yes, they got shit done. Big stuff. And that doesn't happen today. And everything's cyclical. I'm hopeful because, look, whatever you think about Donald Trump, there was a Eugene McCarthy at some point who was just as bad, saying crazy things. Look what happened to him. We'll see what happens.
Witch hunts. Talk about witch hunts.
Witch hunts. This is personal because it matters. And I think that's why we did this topic. I know what you think on this issue, and I respect that completely. And it's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast. We will not solve this issue, but I guess my overriding mission statement is we have to continue to talk about this stuff. Because if we don't, we're not getting any better as a country and a society. You Need to Listen. Episode 5.
Episode 5.
Is there a prize for 5? Is there some sort of gift package for a 5? We have to come up with a listener gift or a podcast viewer gift.
We have to. Next episode, we should both wear our matching shirts.
We do have match. I have a coffee mug too. Maybe I'll bring that out next week too. Kristin Brey, you can hear in the afternoon spanning the state. I'm Steve Scaffidi. I'm there in the morning, 9 to 10. I've got podcasts, but this is the podcast you're watching. You Need to Listen. Always a treat. You're looking good today, by the way.
Thanks.
All right. We'll do it again. Episode 6. Who knows what we're going to talk about?
No idea yet.
If you have an idea, send it to
suggestions.
us. What's the address?
KBREY@goodkarmabrands.com.
Scaffidi at goodkarmabrands.com, or if you want to shorten it, Steve.Scaffidi, 2S1D at WTMJ.com. You Need to Listen. That's an order. No, it's just an ask. Catch you next time.